Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome once again to Emerge and Empower with your host, Dr. Lynn J. We are in a month of celebration. This is Mother's Day month, though I look at it as the whole month of celebration. I am bilingual, so after we've had the traditional Mother's Day, which is the second Sunday in the month of May, then we also celebrate the fourth Sunday for Haitian Mother's Day, which is the fourth Sunday of the month. During the month of May, we'll have different mothers with different perspectives of how they've emerged from situations or experiences that they had in life, whether it was personal experiences to themselves or that of grief or loss of a loved one. So, on today, we have a special guest that would like to share her story of emergence through the loss of grief for her daughter. Tune in, get ready, as our guest will come into the studio. At this time, I'm asking you to go ahead and share, subscribe, and like. Get your girlfriends, your friends, your mother, your family, have everyone come on and let them know that Dr. Lindsay is on Emerge and Empower. It's a beautiful month, and I love the month of May for many reasons. When you think of May, you think of joy and happiness, laughter, merriment, the flowers are blooming, everything's in blaze. It's just a beautiful time of year. So stay tuned as we will be bringing our guests back after this short recording. Welcome to Emerge and Empower, the podcast where we delve into stories of resilience, triumph, and personal growth. I'm your host, Dr. Lynn J., and I'm thrilled to be your guide on this journey of empowerment. Each episode, we bring you inspiring conversations with individuals who have faced challenges head on, emerged stronger, and are now making a positive impact in their communities. Whether it's overcoming adversity, pursuing passions, or navigating the twists and turns of life, our guests share the valuable insights and lessons. Hello, everyone, and once again, we're back, and I do have our special guest on today. Her name is Linda. Meet Linda, everyone. Linda meets Linda. Everyone here in the studio. Hello, everyone. We have another Linda. I'm so thrilled. I'm always happy to meet a Linda. And now I would like to just share a little bit about Linda. She's a retired nurse who has spent 37 years caring for others, experiencing a tragic loss of her daughter that resulted in a profound grief and PTSD, depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. Together with her career, she was determined to increase her knowledge and obtain certificates in professional grief and development, coping with child loss and bereavement counseling. After 12 years of pain, she wrote and published a book called The Road of Love and Hope. It's a memoir of the journey of her childhood loss and grief. Since then, she has been on a journey to self-discovery. She has become passionate about teaching other people who are struggling with grief and inspire and give hope. Her journey has shaped her and given her a sense of determination to embrace every movement of life. Now, this is a mother's story. Linda, go ahead and introduce yourself to our studio audience.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda. It's nice to meet you, Linda. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you taking your time and having me on your podcast.
Mhm.
My story starts with me. I was happily living my life, my best life. It was perfect in my world. I was nursing and enjoying my family of my grown adult children and my grandchildren and friends, and not ever expecting, that grief was going to knock on my door. I had experienced the loss of my, up until Andrea, I had experienced the loss of my mother, and she was my best friend, and I loved her dearly. And it was a very difficult thing to get through that. But on December 20th, 2011, my daughter was killed in a car accident. My 27-year-old daughter, who was pregnant with her second child, she left behind a little 2-year-old boy at home. And the accident, she was sitting in a vehicle, stopped, a passenger in the front seat, and they were waiting to turn. And they were hit by a transport truck driver going his full speed, whatever it was, down that road. And he was distracted with texting and driving.
Wow.
So all morning, the accident happened around lunchtime. I was at the shopping mall 10 minutes from where she was, not knowing what was happening, just doing my
Wow.
bit of shopping, and we were texting back and forth. We had a very close relationship, and she was a social worker, and she was working with the youth of the community. These girls were anywhere from the ages of 13 to 17, and they had just, been through foster care, and this was kind of the end of the road for them. And so her and her coworker had them in the community, and they had created a fundraiser, and they picked up money, and they were all excited. They were going back to the group home, and they were going to, continue on with giving to families at Christmas time. So they were very excited. And I was saying that we were talking. So she had the ability with her job that, we could text, and it was just back and forth all morning. It was the usual, I don't feel well, I'm pregnant. It'd be nice if I could have been home.
Right.
And it's like, that's okay. You're strong like mama. You can do this. You'll get through your day. Just wait till you see your son, And it was, of course, the text messages were filled with I love yous. And then they just stopped, and I had no communication. And of course, the anxiety started to build as hours and hours went by. And by 6 p.m, I hadn't heard from her. Her husband hadn't heard from her. And the problem was they had just purchased a new house.
Wow.
She did not change her address on her ID.
Yes.
So it took them a while to contact the family members.
Wow.
And I struggled with 6 hours of silence.
Right.
And as a mother, right? You just know.
Yes, something's wrong.
So finally, I said to my husband, that's it. I have to, I'm going to go to her place of employment. Maybe they got delayed, maybe her phone, whatever, right? So I started driving there, and I got a call, pulled over, took the phone call, and my husband said, the police are here. You need to come home.
Wow.
And I knew then that she was gone. If she was at the hospital, they would have
said, exactly.
Just said, go to the hospital. But I had to come home, and how I drove home, it was on the highway. I'm sure I did speeds that would have killed me. I must have had angels, God watching over me, because I don't even know how I got home. But that's my story. And for 12 years, I suffered with grief and everything that the ugly face of grief can offer.
Right. Wow. Now, you said she was with child.
She was 3 months pregnant. My birthday is December 28th, and we were supposed to go, and, I was going to do go with her to the ultrasound and all the excitement that goes along with it. Right. And so I lost my daughter and her unborn child, child.
Wow. That is indeed a lot. And so as you are waiting, not knowing, and then only to get this call, because now as a mother, we're already thinking the worst once you can't communicate with your kids. You're already thinking this could happen, this could happen. So by time as they called you and your husband said that the police was there, for you at that time, okay, this is the worst, because now you've already gone and processed every emotion, every feeling that you could think of. So now you think, I'm running home and they're going to give me the worst news that I ever wanted to hear. While all this time you guys were excited about expecting the baby, Christmas is coming, the giving, everything was just on a joyous tone, only to be turned into that of shock, grief, and all of this. So you felt all of these emotions.
Mm-hmm. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Just wake me up, because this is not real. It can't be happening. We all, I was one of those people that we all listen to the radio and we all listen to the news,
Right.
and we hear of different bad things happening and accidents, and this person lost their mother. There were all of these bad things that happen, and your heart goes out to them, and you feel for them, and then you sit back and you can take a sigh and you can say, oh, thank God that wasn't me.
Yes.
But all of a sudden now that is me.
That is you.
I'm thrown into that world.
Right. Yeah. Now, was she your firstborn?
She was my youngest. My husband and I got together 28 years ago, and we had a blended family. He had 3 children, and I had 2 biological, 2 daughters, and he had 3. So my oldest, and then she was the youngest.
Wow, wow.
She was my baby.
That is indeed a lot. That is indeed a lot. And now we got to come back to this journey. The journey now is, how did you cope? The processes. I know in the beginning it was not easy. So you had to build up. So let's take us through this coping mechanism.
Well, in that first year, the first few months, my husband took a month off, and, I basically just walked around like a robot. I didn't know. I was drugged on medication. I couldn't function on my own. My husband cooked for me. Basically, I stayed in bed, and he told me, now it's time to eat. Now it's time to shower. When did you brush your teeth last? When you're so consumed in pain and sorrow and grief that none of those physical activities of daily living matter.
Right.
So he got me through that. And then even when he went back to work, he would come home at lunch, make sure that I had lunch. And, we managed to, somehow or other, life moves you along. Time has a way to travel you, push you through that passage of time. And, you just move from moment to moment, day to day, month to month. And, with that, I had connected myself in the first 6 months to a support group that we had locally here. And eventually, with time, that support group became my lifeline, to be able to sit around and talk about my loss, my daughter, my Andrea, with other mothers who had experienced the very same thing. That connection, you are instantly connected. Because you have a bond. You know what the pain is. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, but everybody has a different story. Bottom line is, you are a mother and you have the same pain. And it doesn't matter the age of your child.
No.
Pain is the pain. So I did support groups. My doctor followed me along. I had antidepressants. I went through counseling. The doctor had diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress PTSD, because I was stuck. All I could do was focus on seeing my daughter in the coffin, and I couldn't sleep, insomnia. I didn't want to let go of that last vision of her.
Right.
And but through counseling, again, the counselor that I had, was very understanding, very supportive. She became like a friend. She shed tears with me.
Yes.
And, I managed to move from that first year. And how does time do that? I can't explain it. I don't know.
Right. We hear it all the time, and it is that time heals all wound. But during the process, thankful that your husband was there to nurture, to care, because you are at a point where your grief had taken over your whole life, your very existence. So
Oh,
having someone to care is, you can say, is what also helped you along, because you didn't go through it alone, even though you were the one that were dealing with the brunt of it, but you had other support. You had others to care, to make sure that you eat, to make sure that you understand you're doing the basic things of living, like movement and eating,
mhm,
feeding. At which time, of course, you were not thinking of those, but they were making sure, making sure that, okay, you're going through this. I know how frustrating and how hard it is, but we're here. And they allowed you, you understand, to go through that. The reason why I want to stay on this a little is because some people think that people should just grieve, like, okay, the funeral's over, it's done. There isn't a time on how long someone should grieve. I believe people should grieve as much as time as they need to heal,
mhm,
instead of going through real quick and then it kicks in later.
mhm.
You understand? Which is, it comes all at once. So if you grieve as a mother grieving over a child, we have others who grieve over their parents. The grief is all different, but it's also about the relationship. Because hearing you speak, it showed that you and your daughter had a relationship. You had communication. So someone who doesn't communicate with their children as often, or maybe, oh, I heard them once a month, versus you who was in constant communication with your daughter, it's like different. You understand? It's different because you already were expecting joy. There was so much that was ahead in the expectation that this was one of the last things that the family expected to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is no time frame. Society says that, what is it they give people that go back to work? 3 days to be off,
Mm-hmm.
something like
Yes.
that. For me, I didn't return to work. I was doing community nursing here in Canada. We call it Victoria Order of Nurses nursing, but in-home nursing, going into people's homes and,
Mm-hmm.
looking after them. And I could not return to that because there was nothing of me. I was stripped of everything. I had nothing to give anyone. So even years later, I could not return to work. I couldn't even be a Walmart greeter because I had so
Wow.
much anger. I wouldn't be able to say hello and, how was your day to someone
Right.
because I didn't care.
Yeah, there was no joy. There was no joy.
Yeah. So, and those first 3 years, I had two um, court hearings because, of course, the truck driver had been
Mm-hmm.
charged. And, we live in a smaller town, so it was always on the radio and, the next court hearing and this, always being on the radio, the local
Right.
news. And so constantly triggering me, constantly
Yes.
thinking about it. And it took 3 years before it was sorted out. And he walked away a free man. He
Wow.
was he was charged with dangerous driving and killing two people, and our legal system failed. They were supposed to submit a couple of papers that they didn't,
Wow.
and because of that, the judge could not find him guilty. So he walked out, lit up his cigarette, and went on with his life that day. And I
Wow.
walked out that courtroom imprisoned for life with grief and without my
Wow.
daughter.
Wow.
So, for the first 3 years, that was, I had complicated grief, and that was one. And then I also had another court hearing at the same time, which
Mm-hmm.
took about the same length of time, 3 years. And that was for my grandson, the 2-year-old. The husband decided uh, that we didn't need to see him.
Wow.
And I said, if I can't see him, I will die.
Right.
I need I
You need
need
some.
my little piece of Andrea.
Yes,
And
yes.
there are no grandparent laws here in Ontario. And our lawyers told us, like, this is a losing battle. You're going to be spending your money and you're not going to win. And I said, doesn't matter. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter. We're going to
we will
win.
fight.
And we did. And, we got far more than we ever wanted. Not
Hmm.
what we should have. I mean, it should
Right,
always be an open door to grandparents. So it
right.
wasn't that, but we did win. And we, over the years, were able to love and have a bond with my grandson. But those first 3 years, there was that. Then my other daughter, biological daughter, grief just tore us apart and we didn't talk for 6
Wow.
months. So I had complicated grief. I was shedding tears and I didn't know what I was crying for, really.
Right.
So
Hmm.
after the 3 years, I realized now, after writing my book, that
Hmm.
I did not grieve. I existed with
Right,
trauma and tears, but I did not specifically grieve my daughter.
right. But here it is. The trauma has happened. You're dealing with the court case. You're dealing with the husband wanting to remove the child. So it's like you're saying, like, wait a minute, do I get any breaks here? Like nothing's in your favor. And so now you have to fight towards to get some justice there, fight to have access to your grandchild. So you're still going through all the pain. So you're reliving them going over and over and over. And it's just continuous.
Mm-hmm.
Now you mentioned your biological daughter, so I'm sure this took a toll on your relationship, family. You understand? And
Oh,
how was that in the home? As far as the grieving, because now you're bleeding, you're crying, it's constant, and she's probably saying, "I'm still here, mom." You know?
well, she wasn't living with us at the time. She was
Mm-hmm.
with her. She was. Uh, oh, how old was she? I mean, it was 12 years ago and she's 45 now. So
Right. Okay.
we had her
Mm-hmm.
three children, right? But what also complicated things was she had three children, and her oldest, my firstborn granddaughter, was
Mm-hmm.
just turning 13 at the time. So she
Mm-hmm.
lost her aunt, and there was some things going on between her and her mother, my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and she decided she wanted to move in with me. So
Wow.
6 months
Okay.
after losing Andrea, my granddaughter moved in with me, and then we had her to raise. So here's
Right.
the grieving child for her aunt,
Right.
watching her grandmother, who is
Grief.
an absolute mess. Her
Wow.
mother is a mess out there somewhere, and they're having their thing where they're
Right. So there's
so
just a lot going on all at the same time.
So I'm now, responsible for the happiness of this 13-year-old. And
Hmm.
looking back in retrospect now, it was probably a distraction for me,
Yes.
probably a
A
distraction
necessary one.
that I needed for sure, because, as a mother, a grandmother, it kind of shifted my grief, and I had to
Yes.
focus on her. So but at the time it was definitely another complication.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Another complication, but I'd also, it was like a wake up for you. Like, okay, I understand you're grieving, but you have a young teenager that's grieving and
Yeah.
you need to be strong for her.
So I
You need,
understand, mothers that lose children that still have other young ones to look
yes.
after. I can relate to them. And I, know, even though I was at a different stage in my life and it was my grandchild, it was still a child that I was responsible for. So, my heart understands parents that have lost a child that still have to wake up every morning,
Yes.
tend to these children that have lost their siblings. I can totally relate with that.
So it was just grief upon grief.
Yes.
And you guys had to navigate your way through.
Hmm.
And so let's talk about some meaningful memories, with your daughter, things that you looked at that brought joy to you, that you said, okay, here, at least I had this time with her. Let's go to some of those memories that draw you back, that you still hold on to today.
Andrea loved horseback riding, And, all through her school age years and even into high school, she enjoyed horseback riding. And that's, those memories are special to me. Taking her to her lessons, watching her learn something that she was passionate about. I mean, there wasn't anything about horses that she didn't know. She read. She was a very studious child in school, and she was a reader. And I mean, she even made herself knowledgeable about horse racing, and I didn't know anything about horse racing. And I went one time in Toronto here to the Woodbine racetracks with her, and she's got it all figured out, and I'm like, all I see is a bunch of horses racing.
Right.
She knew all the details, all the numbers, who could win what. So those are warm memories for me. Of course, when she got pregnant with Tristan, fast forward some years later, we developed our adult relationship, and when she was pregnant, kissing her belly and, being there when the baby was born.
Yes.
And, those are all special memories too. I have lots of special memories about her because she was, all of our children are different, and she was an easy child to raise. And I didn't have to have too many nights of worry with her, even
right
at school and whatnot. But she
sounded like she was very loving,
very kind, very, I mean, she worked with these troubled youth, and some of the stories she would tell me, I mean, she, of course, wouldn't say names or anything, but she'd talk about a situation where, a girl locked herself in the room and she was a cutter, and she, and like some people would be totally stressed with that. She'd come home and she'd be just quietly telling me this, and never once complained about her job. She enjoyed it. She was in the right.
She loved what she did.
Yes. So very proud of her.
Yeah. So her life did have meaning, and she did have impact on others.
She did. And she was, she wrote for her high school in those days, aging myself, the local newspaper, always had an article about what the school was doing. Oh, this last week, our sports team did this, whatever. And she was the writer for the local newspaper for her school, and her initial dream was to become a journalist, and she started out with that. And then, of course, young ones, no, this is not for me, it's not working, it's not quite what I wanted, right? But she did write a book in high school in grade 12, and it's called Spooky Meets a Friend, and I published that for her. So she's an author.
That's beautiful. That's a tribute. That's a tribute. Now let's talk about the support system, because you did mention the fact that your husband took time away from work to be there for you, which is a great support system to show that you're not alone. And also finding the group. Let's talk about the support and the impact that it had on your life during that time.
Well, like I said, first of all, my husband, he's my rock. I'm very blessed, and I wouldn't have been able to do this without him.
Yes.
And again, men grieve differently. So that's a whole other subject, right? I'm sure he grieved, but he grieved in silence. And he has and still is my greatest support system. Even with writing my book, I didn't even know where to begin, and picks me up and points me in the right direction.
Correct.
And the support group, as I said, became my lifeline. I was with that support group right up until just before COVID, and then it kind of dispersed. My counselor, I had the same counselor for 9 years.
Wow.
And it was just again a lifeline. And and the family doctor was really good. I could sit there for 45 minutes and cry to her, and I think that's important too.
Yes.
And at that time, it's not like now. Fast forward 12 years later, there's all these Zoom support groups,
right?
And there were things online then, but just not as prominent as now. And
Right.
I think just immersing yourself with people that are suffering like you, these, Zoom support meetings,
Right.
I would recommend that to anyone. I belong to one now, and last week there were 23 participants there.
That's
23 people grieving that need to talk, and it, you are not alone. That's
yes.
you're left, you're feeling alone, and when you're with people and talking, then you're not alone in this journey, and you realize that you're supported and you have someone to talk to.
Yes.
And I had a daughter, my stepdaughter, who lived like probably 3,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
She was as close to me as my phone, and I did have that connection with her, but
Yes.
not a lot of friends. They're around in those first month, or
Right.
and then they go back to work, and society says, oh well, deal with it.
That's it. That's true. It's true. And you mentioned that because I've seen it a lot where people are going through grief and the jobs give, 3 days, 3 days for bereavement. Not understanding bereavement. We it's I understand when a mother has a child, you have 6 weeks, you can go through 90 days, but they don't put that much emphasis on bereavement. Bereavement is a major, major loss.
A
And each
life
individual,
Mhm. It's
hmm
life altering.
yes,
And how society expects you to just get back out there and go back to what you were doing before, and
hmm
carry this dark cloud with you. I remember when my mom passed, I took 2 weeks off. I was a single mom at the time,
hmm
and I had to go back to work. What could I do, right? And
right,
again, I can understand I was fortunate enough with Andrea that I had my husband, and I had the financial capabilities that I didn't have to go back to work. But in,
right,
in the case with my mom, I had to go back to work. And
hmm
I remember, taking time out to go to the bathroom, and people think you're just going in there to, go there to the bathroom. And I would
right. You
just
just need a moment.
cry and splash my face with cold water, and then go back at it again. You know,
Right.
society is I don't understand. Things have to change there. That's just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Indeed. And I think, especially going through COVID, a lot of losses. People lost their whole entire families at some time. And so there's a lot of grief groups. And for those who are looking even on Facebook, because there's a lot of healing rooms. So they're out there. So if someone is going through right now, there are resources locally, online. If you don't want to go into a place, like you said, there's Zoom, you can meet people online, and just speak you right in the comfort of your own home, because the whole thing is just to have someone to talk to, some place where you can just put put all this weight down, like to unload,
True.
to be able to unload. It is
Absolutely.
important. It,
Absolutely. Yes.
indeed, it's important. So what were some of the activities that you did, as far as I know you went to the grief counseling and you had the support, but what were some of the activities that you did personally?
Um, for me, grounding, through the counseling was told that, you need to keep yourself grounded. And
Mm-hmm.
so using your senses, like at first, it'd be like, I'm too depressed, I don't want to go out that door, but just to go and, force yourself to get out that door, even if you
Right.
walk to a mailbox, or, little increments. And
Right.
eventually with me, walking became a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, even now, if I can't get my 45-minute walk in, like I feel lost. And, that's a time when I would just go for my walk, and I would cry and scream and talk to Andrea and argue with
Mm-hmm.
God, and just release all of those emotions. And I didn't care who saw me, and
Right.
it didn't matter, right? Because it's my
Yes.
time, my
That's
space.
it.
right? And that is very therapeutic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was an incident, probably the best thing that anybody has ever done for me in my grief is one
Mm-hmm.
day uh, she passed in December, and I was at her place of rest, and it was in June. And I was on the ground, and I was just deep in my loss, and I just wanted to be 6 feet under with her.
Hmm.
And this voice spoke, which kind of startled me. And to make a long story short, she sat with me, she talked with me, total stranger, asked me,
Mm-hmm.
who Andrea was. And she said, you can make a garden for her, like
Wow.
a flower garden. I said, really? Like I hadn't even thought of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so where she's placed, it's she is the last row, and then there's just a row of trees. And she said, you can dig up those trees and you can make a garden for her there. And I said, well, they
Right.
do that? And she said, oh yeah, sure. Anyway, 12 years later, spring comes, and I can't wait to see what
Wow.
tulips are coming up. My husband, it became a labor of love. He went up there, he dug up all those sumac trees, he took in loads of dirt, he did
Mm-hmm.
blocking brick, there's a bench there.
Wow.
And it's therapy for me.
Yes.
Because when she bought her house, she always loved rocks as a kid growing up. And when she
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
watched her house being built, and she kept some of the rocks, and she said, it's too late now. They bought the house in August, but she said, next year, I'm going to have a nice garden with my rocks in it.
Wow.
She has a rock garden because we took her rocks and we washed them and polished them up in our driveway. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, so gardening for me, springtime, fall time, we plant 150 tulips. Springtime comes, and it's just, it gets me through the whole summer right up.
Wow. That sounds very beautiful. And
Mhm.
and for her to come and say this, for even for you to connect to the fact that your daughter had already had a desire, you understand, to create this garden,
How did
and
she
now a total
know that?
stranger.
How did
Yeah,
she even know that? She was an angel.
exactly.
I always say there are angels among us,
Oh
and I
yes.
believe that she was an angel that came to me that day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now you just created the garden that she always wanted using the rocks that she kept. And
Yeah.
now every year, springtime, it's just gorgeous, it's beautiful. And yes, that's definitely very therapeutic. A great activity, great activity.
Mm.
Some people turn it into their mess into a message by either opening up grieving centers. There's so many different ways of how people coping and
Mhm.
also carrying on.
And give honor
So
to your child.
yes, honoring them, indeed, indeed. So you talk about the unexpected challenges during grieving and the grieving process. All right. So let's talk about the misconceptions of grief.
Well, the misconceptions I think we, mentioned there about society, they have the idea that you experience a loss and you can take your short little period of time that they think you should take, and then you just get back to life. And that is so wrong,
Yes.
right? Other things I think is interesting. I guess you'd call them platitudes. People say things to you. They have this idea that, well, she's in a better place. And I'm like, no, the better place for her is to be right here with me,
With me, yeah.
right?
Yes.
Or everything happens for a reason. I'm like, why would there be a reason why my 27-year-old daughter just starting her family
Yes.
and starting
Yes.
her life would die? That's supposed to, people say things,
Right.
and I've come to the understanding that they're trying to help, and they're trying
Right.
to, but they just, it's in that kind of situation, if you really don't know what to say,
Don't say anything.
keep your mouth shut.
That's it. That's
Right?
it.
Just be a good listener.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Because I'm a pastor chaplain, and when you're dealing with people in grief, you don't say those things. They're in a better place. Something happened for a reason. This is not what the individual needs to hear at this time.
No, no.
Just be the shoulder. Let them cry. If you have nothing to say, just sit with them.
Yeah,
Sit with them silently. People think they're helping and saying this thing. No, you've never. If you've gone through grief, you will know not to say that to someone because
exactly.
you'll feel like, no, that's not the appropriate thing to say.
No.
You don't just say that.
I
So we use a lot of cliches because we've heard other people say things and we just offer them without
yeah.
understanding. Wow, thank you so much for that. Now we're going to get into the book here that you have, and we're going to talk a little bit about the book. So just give me one moment here. All right. And let's talk about the book, which is The Road of Love and Hope.
Yes, it is. That's what it's about. An unwanted, untraveled road with no definition. You don't know where you're going. You're climbing over all these rocks, these triggers, these things that happen that trip you up, that when you think you're doing okay, you're not. But in the midst of it all, there are clouds, rain, but the sun is always there.
Yes. The
Yes.
sun seems to be the most constant thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yes.
uh, it's my journey of my child loss, a memoir. And I was out walking actually one day and came home and I said to my husband, "That's it. I'm going to write a book." He said, "Okay, that's a great idea." I said, "But how do I do it? Because I don't know anything about electronics, right?" So he says, "Well, you sit down at the computer and you just start writing." So I did.
That's good. So you went through the journey, the process, what you felt, and I would suggest this book to everyone who have lost a loved one. All right, The Road of Love and Hope. So you can find it on Amazon. We will have all the links in the bio, so you'll be able to purchase the book and continue this memoir and also write a tribute also for you or your loved ones. There are things today that was said that you probably never thought about, like doing, putting a garden together, doing something that the loved one had shown desire in or interest in, or continuing something that they were passionate about. So there are different ways that you can still continue the legacy of your loved one. All right. So, Linda, before we end here today, can you please speak to a mom or any individual who has lost a loved one and just give them some word of encouragement?
Well, for someone who has just, is fresh and raw in this new experience, I would say you need to let those tears flow. And if it means you're crying all day, then so be it. Because grief is hard work and it has to be done. You have to feel those feels. You have to feel every single emotion that grief gives you and not feel guilty for it and not feel like you're going crazy, because you're not. It's normal.
Yes, go ahead. You can continue. Sorry about that.
Yes. So just to know that your feelings are normal and validated, you know, um, and that you can get through this. Um, and my inspiration, would be to tell you, you need to embrace those moments. Embrace those moments where if you smile, don't feel guilty because you smile. Embrace those moments where life creeps in, because that's you learning how to relive your life again. Embrace the moments, cherish the memories, and hope for a better tomorrow.
Indeed, that is great advice. Great, great, great advice. And I do thank you for your time today, Linda. And as you can see, this is Bridging the Gap, a mother's journey to healing after loss. All right. So to each mother out there, we understand the hurt and the loss that you experience, and also the children who have lost a mom. So these are tribute to the memory of your loved one, and know that you are not in this alone, and pay tribute to the legacy of their memory on today. So I do want to thank you, Linda, for taking your time out of your day to be able to come on Emerge and Empower and to share your story on here. And I love the fact that you've turned your pain into purpose, and you are no longer existing now, and you are living. And so I applaud you for your strength and your tenacity. And we hear it all the time where it says, you do not know your own strength until you have gone through. And that is when you saw, what God has put super on your natural to exist here today and to even live to talk about it. All right. Even when those moments came when you just didn't want to continue anymore, but the legacy had to continue. And that is living through you every day. Sitting here on this podcast today is another way of you paying tribute and continuing a legacy of a loved one. And so I do thank you for your time, for being with us today on Emerge and Empower.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
thank you for having me and letting me share my story and giving, hope and inspiration to others out there who are suffering.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. So I do want to thank you all on today for being here on the podcast, which is Emerge and Empower. So I do thank each and every one of you for your experience. Okay, I do thank each and every one of you for being here. I do thank each and every one of you for being here today. You've seen Linda's story of grief and loss. And I just want to tell you that there's so much pain out there, but you do not have to go through it alone. There are centers, there are groups, there's help. Do not go through it alone. It comes with anger, it comes with pain. Let's turn that pain into purpose, all right, and continue the legacy of the loved one in your life. And I just want to thank you for being here on Emerge and Empower with your host, Dr. Lynn J. All right. Blessings to you and your family. Until next time. Blessings to you and your family. Until next time.